Today I'll show you how I made this $32 box of wood from Amazon into these nice cutting boards with plenty left over. So stick around and I'll show you how I did it. I got a box of hardwood from Amazon. I'm trying to figure out what to make with it. Of course, I'm going to have to do my first cutting board. This will be my first one. So to make it easy, I think I'll just go with a face grain cutting board, and then I'll move right up to an end grain. So I just want to try this for my own personal cutting board. So I'll go ahead and get started. The first thing, this thing definitely needs to be milled. Some of these will glue right up to each other, like 2 of them. The others definitely need to go through my jointer. So I'll go ahead and get started on that. So stick with me and I'll get it made. The bow is like this. Run it through the jointer like that. This has been run through the jointer. This is not. You can see how far off it is. A huge gap up here and here. So I'm going to take this off right here. You'll see it. There, now that's much better. I can live with that. So I just jointed one edge of all these, and I marked which edge I did by drawing a little arrow here. So I got 2 maple, 2 walnut, and 2 cherry. And I don't want to make it just a boring, mix and match, all exact same width. So I got to figure out a design. I milled another piece of walnut. So I have 7 pieces all together. And I'm going to cut this into thin strips to make accents around the lighter wood. And I think I'll use walnut on the outside edges. Let me go cut this into strips, stick them in here and see what they look like. This is the edge I put through the jointer, so that's going to go up against my fence. And I'm going to cut some narrow strips here, maybe 3/8. So maple with some walnut border, that makes it a lot more interesting. Yeah, that's what I'll do. One more walnut accent. I'll split another maple in half, put it on each side. That's what I'm going to do. So a couple more pieces of walnut. Okay, I'm going to cut this in half. Now I got to cut the edges on some of these. So I only jointed one. Okay, I got the edges milled. Now I'm going to do the face on one side. Okay, I think I'm ready for glue up. That's great. So glad I marked them. Really hard to see the pencil marks on the walnut, but I got it back together where it was. Because I know the bottom of this has been through my jointer. So when I'm done with the glue up, I'm going to put the top through my planer. Using Type Bond 3. Yeah, I just barely have any pressure on them at all. How did I get this one screwed up? That's not good. At least I discovered it now. I hope there's not any others like this. Sure it's squared up. Okay, how do people get the underside of their boards to clean them off? So we'll come out here in the morning and See what we got. Glad these didn't stick. Next time I'll put tape on my clamps too. Definitely twisting it. I got more practice to do on glue ups, that's for sure. There's a couple little gaps in the glue line on the edges, but that's okay. I'm going to cut those off. Make a real light pass the first time. I'm going to sand it. I'm going to start with 120, then 180, and then 220. And why? Because that's what I have on hand. The planer did a pretty good job. I don't think I need to go any lower than 120 to start. Okay, I'm going to set up my table saw to trim the edges of this walnut. I got quite a bit of glue on this side. Just trim just enough to get rid of all that, and then make sure both sides are exactly the same. One thing I do like about this new fence I put on my table saw is it allows me to put a feather board for downward pressure. I don't use these clamps very often, but this is a case where it's safer to use a clamp. I'm just going to trim the edge, kind of I don't know what I'll do with it, just clean up the edge for now. Now I'm going to put some water on this, raise the grain, do my final sanding after this dries. Okay, now for the scariest part, routing the edge with a roundover. I chose my 1/2 inch shank roundover bit, but first I'm going to run some scrap through it, make sure it's at the right depth. Okay, I like that. I'm going to run my cutoff through here. Okay, that looks good. Let's take some 180 and knock down this end grain a little bit. Got one nick right there, the router bit. And I can soften it up a little bit. Now I'm just going to use tack cloth. I'll dust off of it. My wife saw this one and wants it for a cheese board, so go ahead and finish it as well. It's just a cut off. I did point out, yeah, there's a slight gap in this glue line. It's supposed to be a cut off anyway. No gaps in these glue lines though. They turned out pretty well. Time for some. I'm going to do both sides. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for a couple hours. Come back out and wipe it up. Okay, this has been sitting about 3 hours. Still lots of mineral oil on here. After I get this off, I've got my own mixture of mineral oil and beeswax that I made up a couple days ago, so I'll put that on. I really like how this turned out. I love the glue lines. It turned out perfect. There's a slight gap right there at the edge. This was going to be cut off anyway, but I decided to go ahead and make a board. But the board itself turned out really well. I did have a slight bow in it at first, but the planer took it right out. I've got 2 small marks right here that I wish I would have filled in with CA glue prior to finish. And I got a nick from the router, from the round over. Maybe I should have done it with the trim router. I still have plenty of leftover wood. I'll probably go ahead and make another face grain. I've already had people asking me for it. And go out and try a cutting board. It's a lot of work, a lot of attention to detail, but it sure is great practice, and it's great to get this end result. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to like and subscribe below. I'll also post a video on how I made my mineral oil and beeswax